Welcome back, everyone, to the Symposium on Multi-Stakeholders Engagement in Forest, Protected Area Governance for Conservation and Livelihoods. This will be the first of 8 sessions in total that will take place throughout the week until Friday, August 27th. So I really do hope that you're going to be joining me, Vanessa SYT, for the entire week, okay? I am delighted to kickstart our first session, which is on policy support for multi-stakeholders engagement in forest protected areas management. As forest protected areas are traditionally managed by the government agencies, there is a need to have policies that are supportive of engaging different stakeholders in order for them to get involved. So in this session, we will be discussing about policy support towards multi-stakeholders involvement in forest protected areas management in developing countries. So ladies and gentlemen, please take note that after all the speakers have shared their papers, note that there will be a live Q&A segment at the end of the session. So kindly pose your questions on the platform and our speakers will try to answer all of them if time permits. If we cannot address all of them during the session, we will surely be in touch with you via email. Now, moderating the session will be our chairperson, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Dr. Haji Muhammad Puat bin Dahalan, Senior Director of Forest Management Division at the Forestry Department of Peninsula Malaysia. For the last 38 years, Datuk Dr. Muhammad Puat has committed himself to the forest industry. He has published a wide range of books, journals, and reports. Among his significant publications are Local People's Appreciation of Contribution to Conservation of Peatland Swamp Forest, Experience from Peninsula Malaysia, which was published by Springer Nature, Society of Wetland Scientists in 2017. He also presented a paper on rescuing orchids from logging concessionaires for rapid documentation and conservation cryopreservation during the 7th International Orchid Conservation Congress at the Royal Botanic Gardens in the UK. Now, with that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Muhammad Puat.
Thank you very much, Miss Vanessa, for your kind introduction about me. So, okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and fellow speakers, first and foremost, I would like to welcome all participants to our session, that is session 1, talking about policy support for multi-stakeholders engagement and in forest and protected areas management. So as being introduced just now, my name is Dr. Muhammad Puat Dahalan. Okay, then I will try at my level best to chair this session, and it will run from 5 p.m. Until 7 p.m. Altogether, it took take us about 2 hours duration. Okay, so before we start this session, I would like to congratulate the Ministry of Environment and Water, KASA, and of course, MNS, Malaysian Nature Society, and all the associates for organizing this symposium on multi-stakeholders engagement in forest and protected areas governance for conservation and livelihoods. So this symposium actually aims to explore the state of multi-stakeholders engagement and associated forest and protected areas conservation outcomes, focusing primarily in tropical countries, which would help to recommend important policy guidelines for pluralistic forest and protected areas governance in Malaysia. So before we go deep into our discussion today, I would like to share some of the fundamentals that related to our session this evening. So as been defined by Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, forest actually is a land spanning more than 0.5 hectares with trees higher than 5 meters and a canopy cover of more than 10%. So our trees able to reach these thresholds in situ. So it does not include land that is predominantly under agricultural or urban land use. Meanwhile, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, stated a protected area is actually a clearly defined geographical space recognized, dedicated, and managed through legal or other effective means to achieve the long-term conservation of nature with associated ecosystem services and cultural values. The means to govern both these areas are vital as to fulfill the stability of natural environment to generate economic benefit, and most importantly is to promote the quality livelihood. So the commitment to manage both of these areas not just lies under government authorities only, but though participation of multi-organization across sector, which is encompasses of researchers, academies, NGOs, public communities, and private sectors as well, with good practices and holistic approaches. So our aim to manage these areas sustainably would be materialized. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are grateful to have with us 5 honorable speakers that will be talking and sharing some of their thoughts and findings related to our topics this evening. So this session will be divided into 5 series of talks, and every speaker will have 10 minutes for their presentation. So the question and answers, as being mentioned by Vanessa just now, will be begin after the presentation, and I believe we have adequate time for question and answers at the end. So to get the ball rolling, now is the time. I enlightened to introduce our first speaker, Professor Dr. A.Z.M. Manzoor Rashid from Department of Forestry and Environmental Sciences, Shah Jalal University of Science and Technology, Sylhet, Bangladesh. Professor Manzoor is a senior academic and a researcher as well, possessing national and international experiences in the field of forestry and environmental science, particularly on the natural resource management policy. Institutionally governance and community-based natural resource management as well. He has received doctoral and postgraduate degrees in environmental law, environmental science, environment and development, and forestry from Western Sydney University of Australia, Swedish University of Agriculture Sciences, Sweden, and University of London, UK, and University of Chittagong, Bangladesh, respectively. So today, Professor Dr. A.Z. Manzoor will be talking on the dual governance and the shadow of state authority, co-management realities in Rema Kalinga protected area of Bangladesh. So without further ado, and with full respect, okay, we invite Professor Dr. A.Z.M. Manzoor Rashid, and the floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed Dahlan. Would you mind to stop sharing the screen so that I can start my screen to start with? Okay. Honorable Session Chair, Dr. Mohammed Dahlan, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Bangladesh. I'm Professor Dr. Manzoor Rashid from Shah Jalal University of Science and Technology. Welcome you all in my presentation titled From Policy to Practice, Protected Area Governance Through a Devolution of Power, an empirical study on Rema Kalinga Wildlife Sanctuary, Bangladesh. Before going into the detail of my presentation, I like to share the chronology of my presentation. I'll start with the background of the study, followed by theoretical context of the study, methodology, key findings, and I will end it up with some concluding remarks based on my study findings. Now the introduction. Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change, with the high deforestation rates. Over the last 2 decades, Bangladesh lost almost 200,000 hectares of tree cover, which is almost double the rate of the global standard. Significant expansion of the protected areas took place within the last 1.5 decades. Currently, we will have 4.3% of the total land area declared as protected area, with a number of 49 protected areas currently existing in Bangladesh. However, control and command approach still prominent, which is the legacy of colonial era, and the management practice in terms of sustainability, in terms of governance, in terms of livelihood is still a limiting factor. Socio-political and anthropogenic pressures are also aggravating the situation in a quite significant manner. This figure is actually showing the current status of the protected areas in Bangladesh as declared and endorsed by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, particularly the Bangladesh Forest Department. Under the global upsurge in decentralization and governance reforms, co-management was introduced in the protected areas to reconcile conservation goals addressing the community needs. However, governance reforms has faced complex challenges and it has not lived up to the expectation. There are so many reasons behind that. I'll share all these things in the coming slides. Now, the rationale and context of the study. Before taking the study into reality, we have studied so many methodology, context, and theoretical aspect of the pluralistic approach of natural resource governance, particularly the protected area, forestry, and so on. So of many of the issues that we have been discussed, analyzed, and reviewed, some of them are analyzing the dynamics of power relation are crucial for understanding the effectiveness of governance reform process. Where there is ecological problems, there is almost always a power struggle involved. Politics of cooperation become a viable possibility only when the politics of power have been exhausted. Co-management needs to understand from the embedded power relations among various actors. However, very few empirical studies on the power dynamics of co-management governance has so far been carried out in context of Bangladesh. There is a conflict, hope, and frustration centered around de jure policy process versus de facto management practices in Bangladesh. Now, the analytical framework of the study. For our study, we have conducted or adopted good governance principles as a salient aspects that is comprising actors, participation, empowerment through sharing of power, and these powers can be subdivided into legislative powers, executive powers, judicial powers, and finally with the accountability and transparency. Now, the objective, research, design, and methods of the study. The objective of a study is to examine the power dynamics of co-management, governance reform in a protected area of Bangladesh. And for that, we have selected one of the pioneer pilot protected area called Rema Kalenga Wildlife Sanctuary. The research design basically was exploratory case study approach with qualitative methodological focus. Sampling, combination of snowballs, and purposive sampling was adopted. And for methods, we have adopted so many as a combination of qualitative research approach of them, focus group discussion, semi-structured interview, observation, key interview key, and documents review were some of the major qualitative approach that we have adopted to conduct the study. This slide is actually giving a historical trends of Bangladesh forestry sector, how the community engagement took place with time. If you look back here in 1912, we had a initiation of the community engagement in a very passive form called Tonga cultivation, where indigenous community of the Chittagong Hill Tracts were engaged to raise the teak plantation. After that, the biggest intervention took by the government of Bangladesh, specifically Bangladesh Forest Department, started in 1981 with the initiation of the community forestry project in the northern parts of Bangladesh that was assisted and supported by Asian Development Bank. With the good examples, best practices, this principle and the notion was then replicated in the form of various names and projects, also supported by Asian Development Bank. All these experiences, field challenges, and notions, the government of Bangladesh tried to incorporate the community in the forest protected areas. And then they initiated a principle of project called co-management in 2003 with the help of the USAID. And that ended up in 2018 with 3 project regime called NSP, IPEC, and CREL. And based on that notion, our current study site is one of the pilot study site that has initiated or applied the co-management approach back in 2003. This is one of the protected area located in northeastern region. Other than Rema Kalenga, there are 2 more prominent protected area located in the northeastern region. One is called Lawachora National Park, In short form, it is called LNP, and there is another one prominent, is called SNP, Shatchori National Park. So this is one of the second largest natural forest of Bangladesh, where this Remakalenga Wildlife Sanctuary is currently situated. Having the high conservation value at the same pace, there is a high population pressure and pressure of anthropogenic because of the available natural resources. Currently, there are 45 villages surrounding near the protected area, and nearly 100,000 people directly or indirectly dependent on that protected areas for their life and livings. And here you see the 2005, 2008, 2013. These are the three project regime when there are several interventions has been made in this Remakalenga Wildlife Sanctuary to ensure to enhance and to comply the co-management approach in different forms. Now, what are the legal and policy frameworks basically governing our protected areas under the co-management regime? If you look at the Act or the institutional aspect, the Wildlife Conservation and Security Act 2012 is playing a significant role as a basis to declare, to manage, and to govern all the protected areas of Bangladesh. And to assist that act, there are several gazette notifications has been promulgated, enacted during 2006, 2010 to make the protected area governance more comfortable, sustainable, and up to the desire of the local community. For the better management, then in 2017, the Bangladesh Forest Department, with the active guideline of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they enacted protected area rules. And with that rules, the co-management has been implemented through a legal setup called Co-Management Committee, which is popularly known as CMC. Currently, the CMC is composed of 29 members drawn from different stakeholders like Forest Department, local community, indigenous community, law enforcement agencies, local union, the local government leaders, so on. Now, let's have a look to some of the findings based on the study. So we tried to look the community perception on co-management process and participation based on 6 major components like the roles and responsibility, decision-making process, planning and design process, wildlife protection, corruption issue, and the connectivity with the social safety net, and so on. And so based on the key findings, we have encountered both the positive outcomes as well as some contested issues. So if you look at the positive outcomes, the reduction of conflict, progress in forest protection, improving social relation and attitudes were some of the salient positive outcomes that we have encountered. While with the contested issues, roles and responsibilities are yet not clearly defined. And at some points, they are overlapping tasks, creating confusion, conflict between the government agencies and the community organizations, that is known as CBOs. Lack of visibility in decision making, who to do what, is still undeciding factors in many instances. Weak relation with the Forest Department. Trust is a major issue while implementing the co-management.
Okay, dear Prof, just to remind, you have 3 more minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. No worries. I'm almost at the end.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. So with this, the notion of the restructuring of unequal power relation, we found that because of the government unwillingness and at some point legal barriers are still creating, the notion that the local community is not yet welcome and desired by the Forest Department in many instances to be part of the protected area governance. Although it is named as co-management, but the notion is yet giving that the government entities are reluctant to invite them in the whole governance process. If you look at this figure, you see on the left side is the de jure, on the right side is the accountability issue. So with the the de facto issue, you find only the upward linkage with the Forest Department, with the Forest Range Office, with the Co-Management Committee. Although they should have the downwards connectivity with the local People's Forum and the Council, which is still missing. So that is one of the major notions. And if you look at the very downward of the slide, one of the co-management president is showing his frustration that still it looks like it's an an ornamental body. Nobody is sharing the issues. And the most conflicting interest is conservation livelihood, power sharing responsibility, the accountability issues, and the rights to use user rights and usufruct rights. These are the contested issues. Why we call the emergence of dual governance? If you look at the figure, there is A, B, C. That the protected area divided into three issues: protected area, core zone, buffer zone, and landscape zone. With the buffer zone and protected zone, still the forest department is controlling everything, whether it is related with the livelihood or not. So community organizations still have less access to this core zone and buffer zone. So I will conclude with this finding slide, that the existing relative connection with the co-management people and the forest department is still weak. Improper legal and institutional framework is still creating a power vacuum. Lack of state ownership, connection between these two spheres, I mean the core zone and landscape zone, are sporadic. And finally, we are prescribing that our study is calling for more focused efforts to bridge these gaps on the ground. And based on our study findings, we have recently published one article that our chairperson actually mistakenly telling as a title of our present, which is the title of our actually the journal article recently published in Journal of Sustainable Forestry, that is Dual Governance and the Shadow of State Authority, Co-Management Realities in Rema Kalenga Protected Areas. And with that, I like to thank the organizers, all the distinguished participants, and the audience. And if you have any queries, my detail and my student, who is now the PhD students working on the same issues, so you are most welcome. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity. Thank you. So over to Chairperson.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Manzoor, for such an outstanding presentation and for keeping the time. So if I may summarize, Professor Manzoor elaborated the rationale of his study on Rema Kalenga Wildlife Sanctuary, Bangladesh. This is because of very few empirical studies on the being carried out on the power dynamics of the co-management governance, and there is also conflict, hope, and frustration, as being mentioned just now, centered around the geo-policy process versus de facto management practices in Bangladesh. So from the study, it is stipulated that co-management organization and forest department at Rema Kalenga Wildlife Sanctuary currently coexist relatively uneasily and sometimes in open opposition. For those who had any question, as did mentioned by our professor just now, kindly you can post it at a question and answer chat box, and we, of course, we will bring it to Prof at the end of the session. So thank you once again, Professor Manzoor. So,
thank you, pleasure.
Okay, now I think we need to move further to getting more serious this evening. I would like to introduce you to our second speaker. So moving to our next speaker, I would like to bring Dr. Poshendra Satyal from BirdLife International. Dr. Poshendra Satyal has several years of experience in interdisciplinary research, teaching, consultancy, and project management in the environment and development sector, particularly on forest governance, conservation, and climate change. He received his PhD from Geography Department of the Open University UK in 2009, and Master Philosophy in Environment and Development from University of Cambridge, UK, 2002. So before coming to UK, he had obtained a bachelor degree in agriculture from Haryana Agriculture University, 2000, and also bachelor of science from Tribhuvan University, Nepal. So he got 2 bachelor degrees. I think he's a very experienced person here. So he currently works as a global forest policy coordinator at BirdLife International, Cambridge. So without further ado, Dr. Poshendra Satyal will be sharing with us today regarding the nature restoration for green recovery and beyond principles and best practices from bird life experience. So the floor is yours, Dr. Pusendra.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Hello, everyone. My name is Pusendra Satyal. I work as the Global Coordinator for Forest Policy at BirdLife International here in Cambridge, UK. BirdLife International is a global partnership of more than 118 partners in over 115 countries and territories worldwide. In this presentation, I'll describe some of the key principles and best practices on nature restoration, on green recovery and beyond, based on BirdLife's own experience of undertaking a number of conservation and restoration actions in the ground. And many of these principles and policy issues that I discuss, including some of the aspects of multi-stakeholder engagement and participation, are very relevant in the context of forest conservation and restoration, as well as the management of protected areas, which is the main theme of the session and symposium. So let me just go to the next slide. Okay, so the current pandemic has brought into sharp focus how our mismanagement of nature is not only causing ecological breakdown, but also intensifying climate change, and also driving the emergence of new diseases. In that sense, we urgently need demonstrable solutions to tackle triple challenges: the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, as well as the societal issues together. And the nature restoration is, in that sense, critical to this effort, and therefore a key priority for BirdLife. And with the launch of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration in June this year, there is no better time to work together to prevent, halt, and reverse the trends of ecosystem degradation. So with this, we see the potential to develop a global restoration movement, aligning with the achievement of the climate targets of Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Global Biodiversity Framework, in order to support an equitable, carbon neutral, and nature positive future. And this must be central to green and just post-COVID recovery, helping to create the transformational change that we desperately need. And the work of the BirdLife and our partners on the ground can provide some of the important lessons to embed in the best practice. So I have picked, sorry, I think there is some problem in the sharing of the slide. I'll just quickly change again. So I have picked 8 key principles of nature restoration based on the work of our partners and BirdLife worldwide. So in the following slides, I'll go into each of these principles one by one. So the first principle is about trying to achieve multiple benefits. Because if ecosystem restoration is implemented effectively and sustainably, it can also contribute to protecting biodiversity, improving human health and well-being, increasing food and water security, as well as delivering goods, services, and economic prosperity. And it can also support climate change mitigation, also on adaptation and resilience. So for this to occur, it is not simply enough to focus on the quantity of restoration, that is the size of the restored landscape or seascape, or the number of trees planted, but also we need to focus on quality. We can, in that sense, we need to aim at achieving the highest level of recovery possible. In other words, we need to also aim at achieving and maintaining the biological and ecological attributes of the restored landscape to a natural state. So the focus should be on enhancing the ecological integrity and connectivity across a variety of ecosystems, whether it's terrestrial, freshwater, coastal, or marine. We need to focus on both the outcomes and process of restoration. This also in the sense, for example, in terms of the outcomes, we need to focus on enhancing the ecosystem cover. We discuss as a 4Cs principle: ecosystem cover, ecosystem condition, including the biodiversity content in that particular ecosystem, enhancing ecosystem carbon, and also supporting the communities who depend or benefit from that particular ecosystem. This also explains why we need to do restoration. So the second principle is about trying to do restoration in the right way. This also explains what to do in restoration and also the importance of focusing on right processes. For example, in the context of forest landscape restoration, the restoration has to be done in line with what we call the 4Rs principle. Restoring the right trees, that is replanting or allowing natural regeneration of native trees, including rare and endangered species, in the right place, giving priority to connecting and expanding the existing natural forests rather than doing massive plantation, and involving right stakeholders, particularly involving the indigenous peoples and local communities, and doing it through right means, that is considering with the capacity, funding, as well as long-term sustainability. So third principle, which is also one of the important themes of this symposium, is about putting people at the heart of restoration planning, implementation, and monitoring, and the importance of multi-stakeholders engagement. So this also explains how to do restoration. This can be done by applying 3Es principle, that is engaging, enabling, and empowering a variety of stakeholders, and also fully incorporating all kinds of knowledge system, including science, citizen science, local knowledge, and indigenous knowledge systems. So in that sense, restoration needs to be done with and for local people to make it both equitable and effective. So for this, we need to ensure more meaningful participation of variety of stakeholders, most particularly the indigenous people and local communities. And as the local communities are not homogeneous, we need to also consider the dynamics of social differences such as class, ethnicity, religion, culture, age, and gender on the processes and outcomes of restoration. So in order to ensure equitable participation, we need to ask these 3 questions. Who participates? When do they participate? Ensuring that participation begins right from the restoration planning and continues throughout the implementation and monitoring, and how they participate. That is focusing on the quality of participation and ensuring that participation is an empowering experience for the local people. So the fourth principle is about having a robust monitoring framework. We need to plan and undertake monitoring and evaluation, and also incorporate adaptive management and learning throughout the restoration process. For this, we need to have clear targets and goals, and use SMART indicators. By SMART, we mean specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. We also need to recognize and assess any gaps between restoration commitments and implementation, including commitments on funding and resources and how much of that is realized. So at the landscape level, for example, in the case of forest landscape restoration, a number of monitoring tools and methods that our partners have been using, which include remote sensing and community-based forest monitoring, using data from the satellites as well as the smartphone applications, and also using some of the data sharing, coding, and mapping visualization techniques, such as the forest loss dashboard that our partners are using. See, the fifth principle relates to the importance of thinking global and acting local, because restoration has to be undertaken at every scale and ecosystem worldwide, from global to local and vice versa. And as we do not have endless money for restoration, we need to first set global priorities based on the benefits to nature, climate, and people. And at the same time, these have to be honed down to reflect the local realities. While restoration action must be tailored to the local context, we need to consider larger landscape or seascapes, and also the socio-cultural and ecological settings in order to achieve the transformational change that is needed and to support the global recovery so that we are nature positive by 2030. So the sixth principle is about the importance of vertical and horizontal integration. We need to mainstream policies and governance across different levels so that the restoration is carried out across different sectors and society. Most importantly, we need to scale up funding and finance from both the public and private sector. Restoration and green recovery on a global scale requires sustained investment, but in the long run, it can pay for itself. Then the seventh principle is about getting the priority order right, because ecosystem restoration is part of the continuum of conservation and nature-based solution that environmental organizations like BirdLife and its partners are undertaking and advocating. Therefore, the highest priority and the cheapest and most effective action we can take is to first retain existing carbon and biodiversity-rich ecosystems. Then in conjunction with this, we need to focus on restoring fragmented and degraded ecosystem, ensuring ecological integrity and connectivity. This can be done either through natural regeneration or active restoration. We also need to address the drivers of ecosystem degradation and safeguard or sustainably manage non-protected ecosystems, such as the agricultural landscape. And where feasible and necessary, we can do reforestation or afforestation, but we have to follow the principle of 4Rs, 4 Cs, and 3 Es, as highlighted earlier. Finally, the outcomes and the benefits of restoration must be sustained beyond the UN Decades 2030 timeline. This can be in terms of finance, capacity, legal reforms, and tenure, as well as long-term sustainability. In order to ensure that nature is fully recovered by 2050, as part of the truly equitable, carbon neutral, and nature positive world. So by delivering multiple benefits and sustainable income streams through high quality restoration, we can also retain ecosystem for future generations and tackling these triple challenges in terms of biodiversity, climate crisis, as well as supporting the livelihood needs. So I leave it there. To learn more about the work of BirdLife International and our partners on transforming landscape and communities through nature restoration, we have a web story published in the BirdLife website. You can also download a 2-page policy brief there on nature restoration for green recovery and beyond. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer some of the questions you may have. Over to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Pushendra Satyal, for such an astonishing presentation this evening here, but afternoon there, over there. I think they're in Nepal and Bangladesh. I think about three something in the afternoon, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So and also for keeping the time. Okay. So as something that we can share from the presentation by Dr. Pushendra just now, he shared with us that 8 nature restoration principles, which are among others, are focus on the quality as well as the quantity, and of course do it the right way. Put the people at the center. This is a centric. People at the centric, and then track progress. We need to monitor the progress, think global and act local. This is something which is we are supposed to look into, and then integrate across sector and society, prioritize retention over restoration, and of course sustain the efforts. So once again, thank you, Dr. Pushendra Satyal, and all questions to Dr. Pushendra Satyal will be reverted to him during the question and answer session later on. So I think we need to move on to the next speaker. So the next speaker coming up is I would like to invite our friend, Associate Professor Dr. Ahmad Faris Haji Muhammad from Institute for Environment and Development, Lestari, University Kebangsaan Malaysia. A little bit of background introduction. Professor Ahmad, Associate Professor Ahmad Faris received his PhD in Environment Management System, majoring in Waste Management from University Putra Malaysia in 2007. He was conferred Master Science in Environmental Science from University of East Anglia, United Kingdom in 1997, and his bachelor degree honors from University of Malaya in 1994. So he started his academic and research career from 1994 and has 26 years of vast experience of teaching and research in waste management, sustainability management system, life cycle assessment, and industrial ecosystem for urban sustainability. So this is part of knowledge development for supporting the development and application of urban livability and sustainability concept for Malaysia. So his other research interests also include subject on cleaner production and consumption, clean technology, industrial pollution management and prevention, as well as industrial ecology. So this evening, Associate Professor Dr. Ahmad Faris will give us a brief on multi-stakeholder engagement on consultation under the Nation Timber Certification Scheme, MTCS, that has been conducted by Lestari recently. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Associate Professor Dr. Ahmad Faris, and the floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad Dahlan, for the brief introduction. Sean, I will need your help to share my slide. For your information, okay, I'm not a real forestry background person, but my work is related to the MTCS study, which is currently being conducted. This presentation is part of our study, which is still ongoing. And it's a very important study because, for your information, the Malaysian Timber Certification Scheme is almost 20 years in practice. So, Sean, please next. Content of my presentations, a bit of background, forestification in Malaysia, and stakeholder consultation in forestry sector. I'll talk about this. And then what are the method used for stakeholder participation conducted? And then the involvement of MTCC and MTCS, I will explain this later. And then MTCC experience in enhancing multi-stakeholder engagement and consultations. And then a conclusion. Next, please. Okay. The most important aspect of forest is about managing the forest in a sustainable manner. So the requirement for a sustainable forest management has been important policy decision made, especially after the Global Forest Dialogue UNCED in 1992. And since SFM is been accorded prominence, however, it's not where it's a non-binding policy, where there is mostly is voluntary. Hence, there are many stakeholders request that SMN should be monitored. And for example, environmental NGOs stress that it is important that SMN to be monitored and audited, also or assess whether it's achieved the targets. Thus, there is the needs for a system to evaluate the successful of sustainable forest management implemented in all the countries in the world. Therefore, there are two global certifications has been established: Forest Stewardship Council (FSC) and the Program for the Endorsement of Forestification. So this forestification is very important to ensure that sustainable forest management implemented are achieving its objective. So forestification is a process that results in a written certificate being issued by independent third party attesting to the location and manual status of the forest that is producing a timber. So certifications range from forest management unit up to the forest owner level to district, region, and country. In the process of forestification, the stakeholder engagement and are one of the fundamental aspects of forestification. Without participation and engagement of stakeholders, the certification will not achieve its targets. Next, please. So for Malaysia, Malaysia are serious about this. Actually, the forest certification initiative has been embarked earlier. If I'm not mistaken, I was involved since 1994, 1995. Yeah, started ball rolling. Hence, In October 1998, Malaysian government established Malaysian Timber Certification Council, and it started its operation in January 1999. So MTCC, the short name of the is an independent organization that develops and operates a voluntary national timber certification, which is what we call Malaysian Timber Certification Scheme. And MTCC is governed by 11 members of Board of Trustees. So MTCS, Malaysian Timber Certification System, was start its operation in October 2001. So after 20 years, it has become one of the key scheme for sustainable forest management initiative in Malaysia. Under MTCS, there are two certifications, Forest Management Certification or FMC, and then a Chain of Custody Certification. So the FMC provide independent assessment of forest management practice to ensure and promote sustainable management of natural forest and forest plantation in Malaysia. Yeah, two, natural forest and forest plantation in Malaysia. And then next is Chain of Custody Certification, where the audit to ascertain the timber product manufactured or exported are sourced from MTCS certified forest. Next, please. Sean, thank you. So currently, under the MTCS, MTCS has have a good impact in terms of implementation in Malaysia. There are currently total of 5.2 million hectares of forest in Malaysia is certified, which comprise of 22 forest management units, which is the natural forest, and 8 forest plantation management units. On the COC, or chain of custody, there are 379 industries has been certified. In terms of trends of progressions, MTCS is well accepted and also show a very important impact. In year 2000, it started with only 732 meter cube of forest products from the certified forest. And now, as of 2020, it increased its certified timber to 2.4 million meter cube. A very high jump in terms of impact. So in terms of export countries, mostly to European countries, as well as in Japan. In terms of recognitions, MTCS is the first tropical scheme to be endorsed by PFC in 2009. And then in 2019, MTCS received certificate of appreciation by PFC as the greatest increase in PFC certified forest areas for the period from September 2019 to September 2020. Next, please. This achievement cannot be achieved without stakeholders' engagement. It's a very important process and activity. So the multiple roles of forests bring about the different requirement of diverse group of people, resulting in competing demands. There is as our speaker just now talk, and then even when we listen to the keynote speaker earlier, there are many stakeholders have many type of interest in the forestry sector. So stakeholder engagement is crucial, as they will help agencies and organizations in understanding the various needs of interest group and provide an opportunity to collect information and value input to formulate strategic plan or respective agency, especially towards achieve the sustainable forest management target and objective. So although there are many scholars stated that for stakeholder engagement for forestry in Malaysia to be a new phenomenon, for us, actually it's quite a long journey. I believe the engagement with stakeholders for forest management in Malaysia start earlier. Next, please. Sean. Okay. For implementation of MTCS, so the Malaysian Timber Certification Council has embarked a simple methodology to ensure who is the main stakeholders that requires engagement and needs engagement. So they are using just a simple methods through identifying relevant stakeholders of interest to sustainable forest management through an exploratory survey. So they conduct a survey to to determine this. And then from the maps conducted, the MTCC determine departments, agencies, timber harvesting industries, NGOs, particularly that focus on environment and social interests, workers' unions, and as well as the most important, the communities living in and around forests. From this list, and then through internal consultation, MTC able to identify the relevant stakeholders to participate in activities organized by MTCC. Next, please. For the engagement, there are 3 levels of engagement conducted by MTCC for the MTCS. The first one is through Board of Trustees. Second is a standard review committee. Third is the consultation during audit. For the MTCC Board of Trustees, this is a very important level where they govern the MTCC policy, management plan, and activities, and how to conduct MTCS.
Dear Prof, you have another 3 more minutes just to.
Okay, Dato'. I will finish. Yeah. So
Thank you.
the MTCC participation is involved of 10 members and 1 chairman, and the members come from economic, social, and environmental stakeholder groups, research academic institution, and government agency. Next, please. Next, please. For the standard review committee, it's comprised of multi-stakeholder working group covering environment, workers, indigenous people, economy, and government, where their role is to develop and review certification standards based on the 3 pillars of sustainability: is social, environment, and economic aspects. That's why they are managed to establish the nation criteria and indicators, MCNI 2002, and then the latest is MCNI Natural Forest and MCNI Forest Plantation for 2021. In terms of consultation during audit, this is where the real work conducted, and the engagement with all the stakeholders, parties, especially the local communities. Next, please. So over the past 2 decades, MTCC has undertaken the challenge and the gross work in terms of raising awareness, provide training, fostering trust and confidence across a diverse stakeholder groups, and especially for the implementation of MTCS. So the activities conducted have changed the mindset among stakeholders on the requirement for improved forest management practice towards sustainable forest management. Next, please. So the participation of stakeholders, especially among the social and environmental stakeholders in the forest management process, has increased significantly compared to before the implementation of forest certifications. Next, please. In conclusion, MTCC has continually engaged and consulted with various stakeholders addressing multiple demands concerning sustainable forest management through the MTCS implementation. It's a challenging task to balance the complex nature of managing forests as to accommodate the various issues and demand raised by multiple stakeholders. In this, the MTCC through MTCS will continue to engage with all stakeholders in the future through information sharing and capacity building, and the consultation process to be conducted openly and transparently. Next. I think I will complete my presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Dato'. Back to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Ahmad Faris Haji Muhammad, for such a fascinating and interesting sharing. So, as we can recall, Malaysian Timber Certification Scheme, MTCS, started way back October 2001, which provides independent assessment on forest management practices. So over the 2 decades, MTCS undergone multi-stakeholder processes as to address demands and accommodating all the issues related. So again, if you all have any question, which which I'm quite sure there are a few questions or maybe it's ready to be asked. So feel free to drop the question in the Q&A chat box, and we'll bring it to the speakers during the question and answer session. So once again, thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Dato'.
Okay, so we arrive now at the 5th speaker. All right. Last but not least, I would like to call our final and young speaker, Ms. Munira Hanapiah. Ms. Munira Hanapiah is a postgraduate student from Department of Biology, Faculty of Science, University Putra Malaysia, and she is a member of MNS, Malaysian Nature Society, Kedah. She will be presenting a study on the public perception on tourism and nature in Jerai Geopark, Kedah. Without further ado, all right, we would like to call upon Ms. Munira Hanapiah to take the floor. Floor is yours.
Hi, Assalamualaikum and very good evening to everyone. I'm Munira Hanafiah from University Putra Malaysia, UPM. We present my research group to share our finding on public perceptions on tourism and nature in Jerai Geopark, Kedah, Malaysia. So in a media conference during launching ceremony Discover Kedah 2016, Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Mukhristun Mahathir has announced Kedah is in plan to appoint Jerai Mount and its surrounding area as second geopark for Kedah. So on 2018, Jerai Geopark has been declared as National Geopark in Kedah. So what is geopark? Geopark is a geographical area where geological heritage sites are part of a holistic concept of protections, education, and sustainable development. It is the synergy between geodiversity, biodiversity, and social culture, which that particular area is reflected by high heritage value. Connected to this is a social history which identifies the local communities which interact and depend on the environment for living. So, where is the Kedah? Kedah is one of the states in northern part of Malaysia, right in the red level, and is known known to be a rice bowl for Malaysia. And why Geopark, Jerai Geopark is established and important because they are consist of three constituents or crucial part, which is the geology, archaeology, and biology itself. So from the geological heritage, is defined as a variety of characteristics of mineral rock, fossil structure, and landform features, and the element of time, environment, and process. For biological heritage, it consists of mangrove ecosystem at the Merbuk River and also the Gunung Jerai Forest Reserve. For archaeological heritage, Jerai Geopark consists of three sites which are both Bujang Valley, Sungai Batu, and Batu Pahat. For cultural heritage, there's a famous with the legenda Hikayat Merumah Wasa. And for the historical heritage, the formation of Jerai is believed since the age of Cambrian. It's contained of it's highly or contained or defined by the its geosite, geotourism, geotrail of Yan and Kuala Muda. So this pilot study was conducted through a quantitative survey approach, which is to questionnaire that has been distributed directly to the community of Jerai and also to media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and also the WhatsApp. And there's 6 sections in the questionnaire, and the total number of the respondents is 559. So for the first sections of the questionnaire is to understanding of the public on the existence of Jerai, the preparation on the impact on the public acceptance of Jerai, development and changes driven by the existence of Jerai Geopark, the ecosystem that happened around the area, the impact on social culture and also the ecosystem on also island areas. So the first section of the questionnaire regarding the understanding of the public on the existence and importance of the Geopark, 100% of the respondents agree on its existence as a local tourist attraction. Local communities were measured, 79% has understand the importance of the establishment of the Jerai through social media and friends, which are equally important in spreading the existence of the Geopark, and the local communities also emphasize that the information and education on Jerai Geopark are needed for better understanding, especially among the Jerai communities themselves. For the section B, is for to study, to know the impact on the public acceptance of Jerai Geopark. The respondents said that the living impact to establishment of Jerai is to the economy. In addition to that, almost 96% of the local public agree that the presence of the ecotourism in Jerai Geopark contributed to the expansion of the job opportunities. And the local product services such as rental, activity and food retailer are significantly equal that give the benefit to the Jerai Geopark activities. And the section C is about the development and changes driven by the existence of the Jerai Geopark. Most of the Jerai community has experienced development changes around them, meanwhile others are not following the impact. The most notable innovation are the improvement of the recreational infrastructure around the waterfalls and beach, which are among the most visited areas around the Jerai Geopark. As you can see, is the 245 total respondents said that the improvement of the recreational infrastructure impacting from the existence of the Jerai Geopark. So for the section D, the ecotourism activities around the Jerai, 90% of the respondents agree that ecotourism activities has been conducted are able to increase the nature and environmental awareness, and most of the respondents has aware the increment in the number of tourists visited the recent years, which believe that this event has increased the job opportunity. The waterfalls area has been the main attraction, followed with the presence of the numbers of homestays close to nature. And besides, the green scenery of the paddy fields have thrilled the tourists to come to visit of Yat and Pulau Muda. According to the Sharif et al. 2020, these recreational sites can serve many purposes, such as education, research, and also the awareness to the public as well as the tourists. So this is the figure shows the normal, not normal, the famous wave that can be found at Yan and Pulau Muda. For example, kuih bawlu, kuih karas, and also air nira-nipah can be found along the side of the Yan. And emping eringi is a kind of snack that made up from rice. So for the section E, the impact on social culture around the Jerai Geopark area, nearly to the half number of respondents agree about the effectiveness of transferring social culture of Jerai community among the tourists, while the joiners activity has been shared actually and mostly to the tourists, which include Kompak and Lalayang, as well as the other local culture. According to the 97% of the respondents, they feel that proud to be part of the Jerai Geopark community who are able to appreciate nature and local social culture. And 97% of the respondents acknowledge and proud that the honored segment of Yan daerah pelancongan daerah bersih. For the section F, the last sections that been covered in the questionnaire. The question is about the Pulau Kosong located in the area of Jerai Geopark. 77% of the respondents knows about the Songsong Island. However, only 46 of them are experiencing visiting the island. 96 of the respondents believe that Songsong Island needs to be protected to support the tourism activities. And however, the impact factors on tourism development should be identified, and the adverse effect of the coastal tourism activity should be properly mitigated through the development of the strategies by the tourism planners, developers, and also the policymakers. So for the conclusion, the important finding are the establishment of the Jerai Geopark has increased the heritage tourism of the district of Yan and Pulau Muda. Rapid development in the area of Jerai is well received by the local community. Jerai Geopark is said to bring the increment in the economic sector among community, and increase the number of tourists coming to Jerai are noticeable. However, respondents didn't give a good feedback regarding the social culture effect from the establishment of Jerai Geopark. The definition of term eco-tourism itself should be elaborated more to the community of Jerai. The respondent has demand for the deep explanation regarding the Jerai Geopark program. Community of Jerai has their own right to know the future planning for Jerai Geopark, regularly educate the community, and lastly, an effectiveness of information channel are crucial in delivering the current event happen in the area. So, suggestion from the community of Jerai, Yan, the Heritage Tourism District, or in Malay, Yan, Daerah Pelancongan Warisan. One of the questions that has been asked in the questionnaire is, what is your contribution in order to fulfill the slogan Yan Daerah Pelancongan Daerah Bersih? Is that most of them answered the enhancement campaign of the importance of environment and its surrounding at Yan. And most of them too write in the questionnaire, which is keep it clean, recycle practice platform, have a platform of complaint regarding waste around Yan, take a good care of recreational facilities and its surrounding area. Or in our Kedah accent, we say that pakat jaga bagi elok. In English, we say that let's keep it together clean and take a good care of it. So for enrichment, this study awarded by the Coca-Cola Foundation funded, and some of the reference. And last Wednesday, unfortunately, there's a big issues highlighted even in the media, social, covered in the news, say that Yan has a catastrophic event, which is the muddy flood. This is the impact that we can see. The left is the flash. We can see that muddy flood coming from the waterfall area, and post office also bank near in the Yan town has been flooded. So it's destroyed the residents' houses. All of us can see that there's a destroyed bridge. It's muddy everywhere. Destroy their vehicles, their connections of the road and the houses itself. And so before and after, this is the view one of the homestay, the famous homestay that is located near to the waterfall. Before and after. So let's pray for Jerai, because I guess that this is the time that community of Jerai facing on this thing. Okay, so by the end, this is only the finding of our research. So thank you for listening.
Okay, yes, you got your time arrived. You got 10 seconds. I think by now it's already gone. Okay, so kindly wrap it up if possible right now. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Munira Hanapia, for the informative presentation, sharing with you such an interesting job done by your team. So as to recap, Ms. Munira Hanapia just shared her experience on consultation regarding to understanding of tourism and nature in Jerai Geopark, Kedah, as well as public perception among the local community. So again, if anybody have a question or some experience want to share with Ms. Munira, please do not hesitate to drop your question in the question and answers drop box. So this afternoon, this evening, we are very fortunate to have Professor Dr. Juan M. Fulin for the presentation today. So he's going to be the last speaker. So it's very fortunate for us to have him with us. So just a little bit of about him. Professor Dr. Juan Fulin from Interdisciplinary Studies Center for Integrated Natural Resources and Environment Management, University of the Philippines, Los Baños. Professor Dr. Juan is a former dean of the College of Forestry and Natural Resources, University of Philippines, Los Baños. He also holds the highest rank of scientists since 2011 in recognition of his scholarly outputs and international scientific standing. He was 4 times visiting professors at the University of Tokyo and visiting scholars at Waseda University, Tokyo, Japan. So today, Professor Dr. Huan will deliver his presentation on unbundling property rights among stakeholders of Bataan National Park, implications to protected area governance in the Philippines. So without further ado, we are pleased to welcome Professor Dr. Huan M. Pulhin for the presentation.
Thank you very much, distinguished moderator, and good afternoon to everyone. It's my pleasure to be part of this particular conference. Let me share my slide. Oh. What's happening? Apologize. Let me share. A different slide is showing. Let me try again. I apologize for that. Okay, I think it's showing now. So the title of my presentation, as the distinguished moderator has mentioned, is Unbundling Property Rights among Stakeholders of the Bataan National Park and its implications to protected area governance in the Philippines. Property rights and governance in protected areas in the Philippines and probably elsewhere are usually poorly defined and not completely understood by the multiple stakeholders in those particular areas. And there is the lack of studies about the stakeholders' perceptions and property rights in the context of protected area management in many parts of the world. And we argue here that improving understanding of property rights can actually improve governance and towards a more efficient, equitable, or even inclusive and sustainable management of natural resources, particularly the protected areas. So our study is in a place which is called Bataan National Park, and we draw from the valuable work of Slager and Ostrom of 1992 in terms of bundles of rights. And we look at the different stakeholders associated with those rights, try to understand them, and also explain some of the factors that determines the perceptions of the different stakeholders vis-a-vis their property rights. So our study area was declared as a national park in the Philippines through Proclamation number 24, series of 1945. It is one of the priority protected areas of the World Bank Conservation of Priority Protected Areas program in the 1990s, with a total hectares, total land area of 20,004 hectares, 67% of which are classified under the so-called multiple use zones, which means to say that many people can enter and enjoy the benefit of the area. But at the same time, 33% of the total area is classified as strict protection zones. And just like many other protected areas in the Philippines, there's a lot of residents that inhabit the area. In fact, the recent population indicates that there are at least 4,460 people residing within the protected area. And some of the more important existing issues in the area are habitat degradation, as well as decline in terms of forest cover. So we use a mixed method in terms of data collection, ranging from focus group discussions of the members of the so-called Protected Area Management Board, representatives from the local communities, even indigenous communities residing in the local areas. Two groups of them, the so-called Aita Ambala in one place, and also the Aita Magbukan, another type of indigenous people in another place. Of course, we reviewed secondary information. We conducted key informant interviews among representatives of Protected Area Management Office, as well as the different government institutions involved in the National Greening Program. In addition to that, we had a household survey involving 282 randomly selected households from a list of registered protected area occupants. And we use stratified random sampling in selecting our respondents. In terms of data analysis, we use a combination of a method. Stakeholder analysis was the first one, drawing from Greenbelt Enchant material. And then, of course, we also do, in terms of the household survey, a multivariate probit model. And also, we look at the different types of bundles of rights. But in particular, for the multivariate analysis, we just look at the withdrawal, management, and exclusion rights. And the other two, access and alienation rights, were dropped due to insufficient variation. And so this is essentially the types of property rights of the different stakeholders enjoy. DNR is the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Protected Area and Management Board is PAMBI. And so they almost enjoy the different types of by way of law, legal, in terms of access, withdrawal, management, exclusion, and of course, limited alienation, because they can lease the area actually for management. We have the local government units, but only in terms of the multiple use zone, because the strict protection zone is really a no-touch policy, so almost the same bundles of rights. The people's organizations and the businesses who occupy the tenured area has almost the same bundles of rights. The indigenous communities, as
Okay,
well
Prof.
as the
Okay,
tenured
Prof, you have
protected.
another 3 minutes to wrap up, Prof.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Yes. So essentially, the occupant's perception of the property rights. We look at non-tenured and tenured migrants, and both almost look at access almost similarly. Withdrawal, the tenured migrants perceive that they have more withdrawal rights. Management, almost the same. Exclusion, almost the same. And alienation. And then we look at the different variables that influence the perception of the property rights. So essentially, total land occupied, the higher the land occupied, then they perceive that they have more withdrawal rights and management rights. Also in terms of gender head, men perceive that they have more management rights. And also in terms of tenure, those who have tenure would perceive that they have more exclusion rights. And so also in terms of membership, in terms of environmental groups, they perceive that they also have more exclusion rights, including those who are having higher income from the protected area. Essentially, these are the interactions among stakeholders. They have cooperation and conflict, and I won't bore you with the details of that. And these are the implications for protected area governance. We look at pillars of governance in terms of policy, legal institutions, and regulatory framework, planning and decision-making, implementation, enforcement, and compliance. In terms of pillar number 1, establish mechanisms to improve equity of benefits from the natural park, and also strengthen coordination between government agency. For pillar number 2, the need to capacitate stakeholders and encourage participation in making collective choice level of decisions. and the need to strengthen communication and feedback mechanism between agencies that craft constitutional level policies. And finally, for pillar number 3, in terms of implementation, enforcement, and compliance, review measures to generate additional funding for complete target plans and ensure law enforcement in the protected area. And now I'm done with my last slide. This is the last slide. Our conclusions is that indigenous cultural communities feel restrained by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources that prevent them from enjoying the full benefits from the Bataan National Park resources because of certain restrictions in terms of harvesting of the many forest benefits from the protected area. Secondly, businessmen and corporations earn the highest income of all the tenure holders. And third, half of the interviewed occupants perceive to have more property rights than the de jure or legal property rights allow. What is interesting here is that almost 80% of the occupants are actually non-tenured. And these non-tenured perceive that they have equal, if not even more property rights. And this is where the problem lies in essence. And we also, but on the other hand, we also realized that restricted rights resulted to limited accountability for the environmental consequences of the different activities. Thus, while on the one hand, you need to manage those who don't have access and so on, but on the other hand, essentially, you can also just not allow them to do what they want because essentially, in the first place, many of them are non-tenured. And therefore, our overarching recommendation is to forge a good working relationship, not only with the tenured occupants, but also you need to have some sort of a plan, even for the non-tenured, so that they will not serve as they will not in a way undermine the efforts that are being done in the protected area. So with that, thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Dr. Juan M. Fulin, for such an interesting and very informative presentation. And then just to recap a little bit, Prof. Dr. Juan just now had enlightened us with property rights and governance in protected areas, encompassing cooperation and conflict interactions among stakeholders, as well as implication to the protected area governance. So once again, you still have time to put forward questions so that the respective speakers could answer. So just drop in the chat box. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, actually we have come to the end of the presentation today for session 1. And this evening we'll be moving to our next agenda, which is a question and answer session. So we have retrieved some of the question, and I believe the Secretariat also had select and list a question accordingly. And we try to accommodate all the question, but bear in mind, due to our limitation time, because now it's 6:30 already in the afternoon, in the evening. So, of course, we can entertain some of the question. So, to start with, okay, with the speakers already, Dr. Manzoor. So, we have one question for you, Dr. Manzoor.
Yes, I'm here.
So, having almost 45 villages around the protected forest, how does community forest monitoring play a role in the co-management process? How would unofficial monitoring help in formal structures or policies? Could you please respond to that?
Yeah, Thank you very much. The thing is that, as I've already mentioned, regarding the anthropogenic pressures, high population densities around the protected areas is a very common dilemma in case of Bangladesh. But at the same time, you need to create a win-win scenario. So having that in mind, it is possible once you have, giving the rights at the same time responsibility to the local community. Because just by giving rights, you cannot expect something, managing its sustainability. Because we have some sort of understanding and mindset that in the local level community, they always urge for, getting something from the state agency. And so once you have the notion of creating the win-win scenario by giving R&R approach, which is rights and responsibility. So you'll get something if you do something. So by doing that, by implementing or practicing that approach, I believe that the private sector or the unofficial monitoring and the governance can be successful. Is that okay? Is that clearing the question?
Yeah, of course. If otherwise, there will be a follow-up question later on.
Okay, sure. No worries.
Okay. So the second question goes to Dr. Paris. Dr. Paris, so is there any sustainable production forest that is run by local communities? Talking about Malaysian context. If not, do you see the potential in creating such projects as part of community restoration and forests, and also wildlife protection by the local communities? Need your response.
Okay, thank you, Dato'. For this question, I will answer accordingly. Local communities manage and run sustainable production forests in Malaysia as one entity? No. But they do participated maybe in a company that will provide given a concessionaire by the, for example, in Peninsular Malaysia by the state forest department and the state government, and in Sarawak by the Sabah forest department or the Sarawak forest department, because there is not easy for local communities to manage and run a sustainable production forest. It needs a very high funding in terms of training of workers, in terms of technology, in terms of equipment and so on, because it's not easy to manage and run a sustainable production forest, because when especially during the assessment for auditing of certification, because you need to show that all the practices, activities and practices conducted in extracting the timber is in a sustainable manner. Because all this, it will need a lot of funding and technology and training, and it is not easy for the local communities. Yeah, it's very expensive. That's why most of the concessionaire company, whether it's from the state government or the big companies, but what the big companies or the state government companies do is they involve the local communities part of the maybe workers or maybe the contractors and so on. On the second question, on the potential of creating projects such as restoration and forest, wildlife protection by local, yes, there are many. Local communities have conducted this in Malaysia. There are many examples like protection of certain type of species. Yeah. For example, there are in Sabah and Sarawak mostly. In the Peninsular of Malaysia also, there are many. I can to details. You can for those who ask the question, email to me and I will give the details. But they are already done this, and some of these local community participation for restoration, forest and wildlife protection also involve other stakeholders. For example, company, because it's part of their CSR activities. Thank you, Dato'.
Okay, thank you very much for your immediate response. I think it's a very direct to the question just now. I can see from here, Dr. Manzoor, you raise your hand. I think you must have something to add on to your previous answers, or maybe you want.
No, just a question to Faris. I want to know something, Dr. Faris.
Oh, yeah. You want to ask the question?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Be brave and concise.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Farid, nice to know your presentation. Just a thing, is the timber certification process is a legally binding one for the Malaysian issues, whoever is dealing the timber business or something, or it's a voluntary process just to get the value addition? Thank you.
Yes, it's voluntary. Currently, it's voluntary. It's not a legal binding. However, the seriousness of the certification is been taken up by many stakeholders, especially the forest management units, like, for example, State Forest Department. They are serious about it, and there's a demand for it because although it's for export requirement for imported countries, but since it's voluntary, it's a bit a challenge actually. But we are quite in terms of MTCS implementation is quite good because, for example, there are 375 companies already received their chain of custody certification is quite high for Malaysia. Currently, there are around 1,000 companies who involved in the downstream and upstream of timber industry in Malaysia. So the 375 is quite a good number, although because it's not easy to convince them for this.
But whenever you convince them with the value addition, hopefully there will more and more number of industries will come. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for both of you, Dr. Manzoor and also Dr. Faris. Okay, there is one question here. I think this question can goes to Professor Juan. Okay, how can the private sector gain greater involvement in shaping forest governance policies in the context of Philippines? And then at the same time, I think this question also can be answered by most of the speakers today. Okay, Professor Juan.
Thank you very much for that very good question. In terms of the involvement of the private sector, essentially, it depends on what particular interventions in forestry we are talking about. In our case, and in my presentation, I'm dealing with the protected area. And in the case of the Philippines, a particular private sector can actually be involved just in the so-called multiple use zone because they can apply for some sort of a developmental lease. Let's say they want to to establish a recreation site or ecotourism site. So that's possible, no? And so this is really their involvement is really in terms of the developmental aspect, no? But of course, there are also other private institutions, on the other hand, who are in terms of their corporate social responsibility, also assist some of the communities by providing some livelihood activities and so on. So again, in protected area management within the multiple use zone, then they can be involved on this particular aspect. Thank you.
Professor Juan. Okay, question number 4. If I'm not mistaken, question number 4 goes to Ms. Munira. So in the past week, we have seen an unprecedented amount of water flow at Gunung Jerai that has caused a lot of destruction to the park structures and ecosystem. How will this affect tourist perception in respect to your findings?
Okay, thank you for the question. The effects to the tourist perceptions. As my study previous, we find out about the perceptions of the community Jerai. So now when this catastrophic events happen on Jerai, I mean the impact is to the Jerai community. So at first the tourist perception is they must understand that building up the community after the disaster is not an easy work. By means that what I've to reading, there's a 4.7 million from the Ministry of Environment and Water agree in conjunction to help in building up back the community of Jerai in terms of their tourism, because Jerai Geopark is known to be ecotourism and is give a huge impact to the community Jerai through their economic sector. So as for that's for tourists. The answer is for tourists that takes time. It takes time for the Jerai Geopark to recover it back. Because a lot of numbers, tourism, number of facilities has been swept away. Homestay, chalet near to the waterfalls has gone already now. The current we have the works, we have increased number of works surround the area to recover it back. And for the community of Jerai, what we concern and highlights now is that their welfare and their well-being. That's the most important things now. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Munira, for very satisfying response on what is being asked. Okay, the next question is to Dr. Poshendra Satya. So, are you ready, Doctor?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something.
Oh, you want to ask something? Okay, please, before I ask any question, you can pose any question now. Okay.
Okay. So I just wanted to add to what Professor Pulhin said about the private sector involvement. So obviously it depends on the type and the regimes of the forest governance we are talking about. So in the keynote address by a friend of mine, whom Gurung highlighted about, in protected areas management is well, in some of the places in the world, there have been involvement of the private sector. If I work, we are talking about the local level as well, like in many of the other areas, even the local community forest user groups, for example, in Nepal, they have been working on some kind of entrepreneurship development of the non-timber forest products. So they are also learning some of the aspect, and then they are also becoming some private entrepreneurs as well. And at the national and the global level as well, if you see, then obviously REDD+, there is a lot of interest in forest carbon, in FLECT as well. There is timber legality issues, and then also supply chain of the legal timber. And then if you look into the individual commodities as well, like agricultural commodities, there is the aspect of this zero deforestation commitment plan that many of the industry and the companies are interested in as well. So I see that they are very important stakeholders, probably more influential. And in the topic I talked today on restoration agenda as well, because we need some funding and finance, which has to be supported by both the public sector as well as private sector. So I see that we need to get more involved with the private sector as well. So I just wanted to add that. So if you have any other questions, then you can ask me.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Poshendra, for the response to the question just now. All right. So, but the follow through. There's another question now being addressed to you. So, among the key principles that you have outlined in your presentation, if you were to pick the most important one, which one would you think is critical to the successful restoration?
This is quite a difficult question to answer, but I'll try. I think if I have to pick among the 8 key principles, then probably what I can do is summarize the principles. Like, I have highlighted the principle of 4 R's, 4 C's, and 3 E's. So, we not only focus on ecosystem cover, but we also need to make sure that ecosystem condition, that is the biodiversity content in that particular ecosystem, even the ecosystem carbon, we need to focus on enhancing that and supporting the communities. So principle of 4Cs. And then we have to do ecosystem restoration in the right ways, including right species, involving right stakeholder, and then doing it through the right means, and also do it in the right area, right location. So I think in terms of the particular topic, the focus of this session as well as the symposium, the most important aspect is considering 3 E's, how to do stakeholder engagement. So, enabling, engaging, and empowering the different types of these stakeholders, including private sector, local communities and indigenous people, and making it their involvement should be both in the forest governance decision-making process as well as implementation, and it should continue up until the monitoring as well. So I think I try to summarize it there.
I think there is a E there, empowering, enabling, and another one is what?
Engaging, enabling.
Engaging. So actually, that one is just one letter E, is the critical to the successful restoration, but carries different meaning or component altogether. All right. So there is another one question here. The question keep coming right now. I think we cannot end by 7, maybe. I'm not sure, but just this is to Professor Juan. Another question for you, Professor Juan. How can we ensure equitability in power and accountability of stakeholders with interests in and around of protected areas? Many with high interest and power. That is being asked, the question being asked. Okay, please respond.
Thank you very much. That's a very challenging question, actually, in as much as in a multi-stakeholder setup, there is always the uneven power relations associated. So I'll start with a tool, and we found the stakeholder analysis as a powerful tool to unpack the different levels of power relations among different stakeholders. So in the very quick presentation that I did, we look at power alliances, but also we look at conflicts among different stakeholders. And once you have that, in terms of ensuring equitability, in terms of power, essentially, then once you have mapped the power and understood the power differentials among different stakeholders, then you can make the appropriate interventions, such as the different keywords that was earlier mentioned. No, you can empower by capacity development those which are marginalized, particularly the local communities. In my context, it's the indigenous people, actually, that are relatively powerless, and therefore you need to have some intervention so that there will be more or less equal power relations, and therefore that will enable them to sit equally at the negotiating table, so that they can articulate their interest as well and be incorporated in the decision-making processes. But at the same time, what about in terms of ensuring accountability? And again, a good understanding of the different stakeholders would be a prerequisite for that. So accountability, too much power, those who wield power should also be made accountable. And therefore, there is a need for continuous monitoring of, let's say, in a protected area management plan. But at the same time, there has to be enforcement, and if at all possible, if you have a mechanism, in the case of the Philippines, we have the so-called Protected Area Management Board. And it's a confluence of different stakeholders that in a way shape policies, but at the same time provide directions as far as the management of a protected area is concerned. So therefore, accountability, and there are actually various hierarchy of accountability. At the local level, then enforcement can be done by the local communities. But if, for instance, we are dealing with more powerful stakeholders, then enforcement can actually, or even I would add sanctions, can be done at the higher level. Let's say at the department level, if violations are really severe, like violating lease agreements and so on, or even at the local government level. So again, as I've said, the key is understanding the different stakeholders, their levels of the power that they wield, and also capacitating them and enforcing appropriate rules and regulations so that there will be equitability in terms of power relations as well as accountability. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Professor Juan. Actually, we have another two more last question. Okay, two more last question for our question and answer session right now. So the second last is to Professor Manzoor. Okay, can co-management stop biodiversity losses in forest areas of Bangladesh?
Thank you for the question. It's a very pertinent one, and we are on and off being questioned whether co-management is giving that notion. The question answer is yes, again no. Yes, in the terms that if you can arrange, if you can empower the local community, giving them the rights and ownership of a specific protected area with a manifested accountability, then it's yes. On the other hand, if there are some political influences, other stakeholders' influences for the land, for the forest and other things, given all the inputs and efforts by the local community, it is a challenging task, because it's happening in our cases in many of the protected areas. The community are very, I would say, the vibrant community. They have the ownership, they are living on it. But on the other hand, you know that because of the land scarcity, there are so many other eyes on the forest land. And this is the easiest way to get land is the forest land. So that's the challenging task. So if you can ensure that part, then it's a very easy answer. But if there are so many influences from the upper tiers, then it's a challenging task that we are facing in many cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manzoor, for that response. Okay, the last question for this session today is addressed to Dr. Poshendra. So how do you see the integration of United Nations 2020 Decade of Biodiversity and the 2030 Decade of Ecological Restoration? Sometimes it feels like we have to start from scratch as there is a new hype phrase being introduced. Could you please respond to that, Dr. Poshendra?
Yeah, I think, thank you for this question. I think there is a complementarity between these two initiatives. Obviously, you know, ecosystem restoration is part of the UN decade. It also relates to some of the aspirations we have in terms of, you know, I mean, there is a new post-2020 global biodiversity framework being negotiated between different countries. And then, you know, there is a COP, Conference of Parties coming, 15 coming in China. Yeah, and then the text is being negotiated. And there is also, we have this COP26 for the climate change. So, you know, CCC happening here in Glasgow as well. And then there is a challenge for meeting the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. So in that sense, because many of the aspects, I mean, and as I discussed during the contextualization slide as well, these triple challenges cannot be tackled alone. We have to tackle them together. And recovery of nature and nature preservation is one of the ways we can do, because that also relates to climate, people, and nature. So I think rather than seeing it through different lens, there is a complementarity. And then obviously some of the international organizations like, IP-based, this Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, as well as IPCC, has highlighted that we need to tackle these challenges together. So I see that it complements the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, complements to those initiatives, and so that we can have, in a true sense, carbon neutral, equitable, and nature positive future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Posendra, for a very good response to that question. I think the person who asked the question should be satisfied by the answer. All right. So, okay, ladies and gentlemen, actually we have come to the end of the session today. So before I hand over this session to Ms. Vanessa, so I would like to congratulate all the speakers for very entertaining session today, and all the audience for participating in this very important symposium. So I do hope that our involvement today can contribute to the knowledge sharing and harnessing ideas regarding to the policy support for multi-stakeholders engagement in forest and protected areas management. So before we end our session, I would like to ask everybody, speakers and all the person involved in this sharing, to open up what you call this for the group photo, to turn on their camera for the group photo. So I can see Mr. Sean still not turned up. Okay. I would like
sorry,
to.
Dato'. It's just the chairperson and the speakers only.
Oh yeah. I thought everybody in this. Okay. So chairperson and speakers. All right. Okay. Everybody ready? Just a big smile. Big smile. I would like to go for a countdown now. I think Vanessa is ready there. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Done?
Maybe you guys want to do one more?
One more. Okay. All right. But Prof Ahmad Ismail is not inside. Okay.
Prof Ahmad Ismail should switch on video.
Okay. All right. One more time, huh? Okay. I start with the 5 lah. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Okay.
Yep, got it. Thank you, Dato'.
Okay, right. So I think with that, I would like to pass over to Vanessa, Miss Vanessa, and of course, let us give a round of applause, and we hope to see you all again as in the near future. So thank you very much, and nice to be with you all. Thank you.
Okay, Vanessa, Dato'.
Thank you so much. Well, Dato' Puat, that picture taking was actually you guys are the stars, got nothing to do with me. So I'm happy all of you were smiling really wide and beautiful. Yeah. Now that was an amazing session. Oh my gosh, my mind is just blown. That's so much information right now. But I really hope the audience have also taken what they can and hopefully do really great things with it. So thank you once again to Dato' Puat for chairing the session, and a big thanks to all our speakers. If you can have a digital applause, that'd be beautiful. So that concludes our first session. I really look forward to seeing you again tomorrow for our second and third session. We will be covering 2 topics: institutional design for pluralistic forest protected areas governance and actors in power in forest protected areas management, respectively. Till then, have a great evening ahead, and I will see all of you tomorrow. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.